Everyone, welcome to the first press conference of the season. If you have a question, please remember to use your microphones. Just one click, you get a little red button, and make sure you turn it off once you're finished. We'll start with Matthew as usual. Matthew.
Thanks, Lee. Eddie, morning. New season is here. How excited are you?
Yeah, there's always a great feeling before a new season. So much unknown. I think we've had a good pre-season. Lads have worked really well. It's been an intense period, as it always is. But I think we look fit. The team's in a good shape, especially after the 2 games last week. So looking forward to the game.
And how nice is it for you to have the opportunity to kick things off in front of your own supporters at home?
Yeah, I mean, I think your preference is always for that first game to be at home. When you go back 2 years ago to the Nottingham Forest game, that was a big win for us to set our season off. That was a tough game, though. Newly promoted teams. There's a lot of similarities between that game and this one. We know the supporters will be with us. We know how important they are to our season than they were last year. The environment at St James's Park was incredible. But we have to do our bit in terms of intention and all the little things that make the difference at home. We have to repeat from last year.
And what about your opponents? Southampton promoted through the playoffs just a few months ago. How do you think they will approach things, and will they be doing anything differently now they're in the Premier League under Russell Martin?
Well, I think that remains to be seen. I think Russell's done a great job. I've always admired his style of play from Swansea to Southampton. I think he's had strong beliefs in how he sees the game. Very clever, tactically, very astute, slightly different. And I think all of those things add to a complex game for us that we need to manage correctly. We need to do our preparation and deliver a really good performance. This will be a difficult game. They are, as I say, they're slightly different, and we need to be ready for that challenge and know that there's no guarantee in anything. You know, we have to deliver a really strong performance.
Just want to ask you finally about one player, Miguel Almiron. There's been some reports about his future this week and the possibility of a move to the United States. He is still here. He's still your player. What's been your position on that and on Almiron's situation?
Yeah, there's been a lot of speculation though with Miggy over the summer, and I'm sure that would have been very difficult for him. I think there was a lot of speculation as he was playing for his country during the summer. I think he's a really valued member of the squad. I'm sure that speculation would have been difficult for him to manage, but he's very much with us. We very much value his qualities and what he brings, and I hope he has a great season. So
you'll be happy if he ends up staying, whether there's interest or not, if he's still your player when the transfer window closes?
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll work with Miggy to try and get his game to the level it was 2 years ago, where he was absolutely incredible for us. His commitment and his attitude and professionalism is second to none. He is a truly brilliant person and a great professional. So he is an important player for us, and we don't underestimate his qualities in any way.
Thank you. Keith Downey?
Eddie, you were at times last season beset by injuries, and I think it almost became the story of your season. There's obviously a few players still missing, a hangover from last season, but where are you in terms of the overall picture injury-wise going into the new season? Do you feel like you're in a better position?
I think we're definitely in a better position than we were for the majority of last season, and certainly to the back end of last season. So we've got Nick Pope back fully fit. I'll touch wood with all of these because we've still got training before we play. Joe Willock's in a lot better place. I wouldn't say he's 100% match fit. He's had 2 games, he's trained well, but he's certainly on the road to being the Joe Willock that we all know and love. Several other players that I think are in a lot better physical condition than last year. We've got obviously Sandro hopefully getting closer to returning, but yeah, we still have the legacy of the injuries from last year, the long-term ones of Jamal Lascelles, Sven Botman. Obviously, we lost Callum during the early stages of pre-season. He's a huge miss. Louis Miley. Matt Targett's making his early steps back. He's trained this week, which has been brilliant, and he's trained really well. So we've still got some work to do, but we're in a much better place.
And is there a feeling that if you manage to keep the injuries to a minimum, and of course I know that is a big if and it's hypothetical, but is there a feeling that if you manage to do that and you keep the majority of your best players available, you can have a real go this season, because your squad looks strong if everyone's available, or the majority of them are?
Yeah, of course. I think that was always the plan, is to keep your best players fit. And I think for us, with our style of play, being as intense as it is and as demanding it is, we can still do that. The two things go hand in hand. I got to say, from the pre-season perspective, I think it's been managed really well. I think we lost Callum, but apart from that, I think we're in pretty much full bill of health from pre-season onwards. But we've got the work into the players, but the squad's generally very healthy, motivated. Fitness-wise, I think we look good. I think there's a couple of players that are still a little bit away from their optimal levels, having come back later. But overall, I'm happy.
When do you expect Callum back? Do you know yet?
Callum will be the early season, so a couple of games in, I think. Okay. He's making really good progress. He's really feels good and wants to push a bit faster. But we're just trying to manage his comeback. And
on Tino Livramento, I saw him last week in the friendlies, and he actually looks like he's changed physically. He looks like he's sort of filled out a bit, looked really strong. Is he in a position now, because obviously at times last season he was playing second fiddle to Kieran, but is he in a position now where he's ready to be a regular starter and he needs to sort of be let loose, if you like?
Well, I think his performances will dictate that, not his feeling. You know, it will be how he performs. I think physically he's in a good place. He's had just trying to think the majority of pre-season, I can't think of any issues for him really during pre-season. He had his ankle injury at the back end of last year, but we really believe in him. We really love his qualities and what he brings to the team. But he's got serious competition in Kieran. I mean, that's going to be fascinating to see how those two players compete if we play with a back four for one position. Got two top talents, two amazing characters, so that's going to be an interesting thing to see.
And just finally from me, you said last week that in terms of transfers you were looking for quality rather than quantity. With that, does it make it harder to get a deal done? I mean, I know you won't talk about individual players, but we all see the talk about Mark Gahey and the protracted move for him, but in general, is it harder to get a deal done when you're looking for that top level of player? Does that drag it out a bit longer?
I think everyone's looking for the best players that they can find. I think from our perspective, as you said earlier, we've got a good squad. When everyone's fit, I think we've got a very good squad. So to sign players and make your squad better is difficult, but it's achievable. We can do it. But what you don't want to do is make a signing and then in 3 or 4 months' time go, well, it hasn't really kicked us on anywhere, and you're just adding numbers. That's something we've got to avoid at all costs, in my opinion. So it's the difference makers, the players that can take the team on, is what we're looking for.
Thanks, Eddie.
Thanks, Keith. Andy?
Morning, Eddie. Good to see you. Busy old summer, obviously, with the trips to Australia, Tokyo, etc. But you did find time for a bit of acting with JT for the Adidas adverts. How did you find it?
Yeah, it was good. I mean, it was something slightly different. I think taking out our comfort zone to a degree, and I think you realise, and you have a lot of sympathy for all the actors out there that work for days on end for probably one scene. Me and Jay, it felt like a lot of work for a sort of a little 2-second flash. I thought JT was the star of the show, to be honest. When I look back at the advert and when it was all finished, I was disappointed with my part. I thought I could have done a lot better, but JT was dominating the screen. Good to see.
Been too hard on yourself. Seriously speaking, the fans a few of them I've been speaking to, kind of described the transfer window in the summer as frustrating with PSR, the transfer window. I just wondered how you would kind of describe it from a managerial perspective, that side of things.
Can't swear, can I? June was difficult. June was stressful.
Yeah.
June was very, very different. I've not been in that situation before, where you're in a position where you're looking to potentially make decisions from a financial perspective, but not from a football perspective, and that sort of goes against everything that I'm thinking about is trying to improve the team. But for that moment, it was totally different. once that had gone and we sort of got over the disappointment of losing two really talented young players that we didn't want to lose, you look forward and you look to the future. You have to, and it's all then been about improving our squad as much as we can. Now, I think the players that we've recruited so far, albeit not huge in number or transfer fees, I think have added to the group, but we're certainly hoping we can do some more in the next 2 weeks.
How many times has anyone mentioned silverware to you in this pre-season and ahead of this new season, and what will you want to be talking about come May 2025, would you think, as far as that is away?
Yeah, I think, of course, that's the ultimate goal, is to lift a trophy or trophies on a consistent basis. That has to be Newcastle's aim from now onwards. And of course, I share that vision and I'm encouraging that vision. But I think if you're focusing purely on the outcome of the trophy, you're losing sight of what you need to do. We have to improve everything we're doing. We have to be smart in the transfer market. We have to improve our training. We have to improve every aspect of the football club to try and get there. So I'm sort of very much in the middle of the process and I'm not thinking about the end result, but that's always on my mind.
It was great to hear as well, just the other day, the definitive return date for Sandro Tonali. Have you spoken with him since that news has kind of been released, and just how excited is he to be back and playing competitively again, because it has been so long?
He's a very cool customer, Sandro. He's not outwardly emotional necessarily, sort of day to day. You don't sort of see that I'm back, a big grin on his face, but he's very contained emotionally. He's very strong. I think he's handled himself so well during this period. He really has. I mean, when you consider how difficult it's been for him, I'm sure he's had some really hard days. But there's the pressure of the media. There's dealing with everything that's gone with his situation. He's trained really well. He's been a great teammate. I think the players will only speak highly of how he's conducted himself, and they see the true Sandro sort of sometimes more than we do in the dressing room. But I know how focused he is on his return, and I know how excited he is to come back and to show to everyone, to Newcastle, and to thank everyone from Newcastle's perspective, how they've treated him, how they've handled him, especially his relationship with the supporters, which is incredible to see from my perspective. Again, another huge thing for me to say thank you to the Newcastle supporters for how they've looked after him, for how they've dealt with him socially. I think it's been an incredible response, and that will only help him when he returns.
Yeah, be great to see him back. Just finally from me, on a completely different note, I don't know if you saw the story of Mikel Arteta employing a team of pickpockets to keep his team alert. It was described ahead of the new season. How are you keeping your players alert before the new season and heading into this game against Southampton? I can't imagine you've employed a team of pickpockets, but...
Well, may I say what a great link to the question?
Thank you.
That was impressive.
I get the good questions out of the way at the start of the season.
You used them up. I don't have anything to give you that's even relatable to that. But
yeah.
I've not seen the story, so I'd probably need to dig into that a little bit more.
Cheers, Eddie. Best of luck tomorrow.
No worries.
Thanks, Andy. Nisha?
Morning, Eddie.
Morning.
Alexander Isak is a player that will be huge for you this season. Do you think he could be the Premier League's top scorer come May?
Well, he could be, yeah, of course, and he's got the talent and the ability to be. I think he's had a good pre-season, but he's going to be competing against all the elite strikers that are in the Premier League. I think it's our job to supply him, as the team, to try and give him as many chances as possible as our centre forward in the team at the moment. But also there's an expectation on him to do all the stuff that won't get talked about so regularly here, in terms of leading our line and starting our out of possession game plan, delivering that to the highest level he can, set plays, etc. All the stuff that probably is not seen is so important from a striker's perspective now in the modern day. But we do need him to contribute, of course, his assists, his creative play, and of course his goals, which is fundamentally so important to us.
What do you make of the VAR changes coming in, supposedly a higher threshold for intervention, quicker? Are you feeling quite confident about that coming in?
Well, I think year on year you'd love to think that the whole process will improve. I think speed's important to everybody connected with football because it is a high intensity game. We want it to be a quick game. So I welcome that. I do welcome, and I've always said, more responsibility for the referees in game decision making. They're sensing the game, they're feeling the emotion of the game, they're very much reacting to the moment that they're in, and I think that needs to be respected. So a higher threshold for their decisions I back as well. But of course we just want to see a better product, and we want to see more consistently right calls, and hopefully this will help.
And just finally, you've spoken about injuries, but I just wanted to double check about Fabian Schär, because he seemed to get injured last weekend.
Yeah, we're hopeful Fabian will be okay. He felt the effects of the tackle early in the week, but fingers crossed he'll be fine.
Thanks, Nisha. Damien Spellman?
Hi Eddie, just going back to something you mentioned earlier. You've been in football a long time, worked through some difficult periods. You're now working for a club with potentially enormous spending power, but you're having to take financial over football decisions. How difficult is that as a manager?
I think I had a really good grounding. During my early years at Bournemouth, it was transfer embargoes, couldn't sign players for a year, players not getting paid on a regular basis, bailiffs coming into the football club on a regular basis, daily. So I think I had a really good grounding in terms of the finances and how delicate they can be for any football club. The situation, of course, here is totally different to that. Here we're restricted in our spending because of financial fair play rules, which we have to respect, we have to adhere to. I think the only thing from my perspective, and I've said this before, is I've got no issue dealing and working with the restrictions that we're under, but the expectations then have to be adjusted to what the reality of the world we're living in. And I think sometimes there's a misalignment. There's constantly talking about the richest club in the world and we've got all this money, but we're not allowed to spend it. So expectations have to be adjusted, in my opinion.
And just on that front, there were reports this morning that a fourth bid has gone in for Mark Gay. I know you don't want to talk about individuals. Is there anything close at all on any front?
Not that I know of, no.
Thank you.
Thanks, Damien. Lee Ryder?
Hi Eddie, just going back to a couple of years ago when you got into the Champions League, great achievement. Do you think, looking at this season, it's going to be even harder now? See, West Ham have spent a lot of money. There's a couple of other teams I could throw in there as well, but it's even more competitive than it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think the Premier League does. I think it year on year gets more competitive. You see more and more teams now that are spending money, but spending money doesn't guarantee anything, but they're spending money wisely, in my opinion, making some great signings. So I think that just makes everybody better, and it bridges the gap. But I think from probably a neutral perspective, that's great. I think the Premier League being a tight league and never quite knowing what's going to happen next makes for the product that we have. Of course, from our perspective, we have to maximise every ounce of ability, energy, quality from the group that we have. That's my job. I think we've got a really tight group. You know, we haven't got excess players. We've got a small squad, but a squad when everyone's fit of high quality. And my job is to try and get every ounce out of those players.
And just on Kieran Trippier, whether he plays or he doesn't, we've seen it at the Euros when he didn't play in the final. He was in the tunnel, going round, geeing everybody up and stuff like that. How much do you value that type of character behind the scenes?
Yeah, I think so important that your experienced players are good leaders and they're good people. That's fundamentally important to the group, because if your experienced players aren't those people, then you have issues. You'll have a difficult changing room to manage. So the experienced players have a duty of care towards the football club to act in the right way, to look after the younger players and to set the right role model and the right intent every day of how we're going to work and what our attitude is to our jobs. Kieran's the epitome of that. He's an incredible person, a great leader, and we're delighted that he's with us. And
just finally, on competition for places, I guess you're never going to complain about that. It's better than the team picking itself. Yeah, I think I've been through in my career as a manager, I've been through every situation when you've had loads of players to pick from, no players to pick from, and certainly the better one is having more players than none, because that competition is what drives players on. There's no
other way for them to think. If they want to get in the team, they have to show they're better than the guy they're competing with.
Thanks, Lee. Jordan?
Hi, Eddie. When you're asked about transfers, you don't tend to give a lot away. Now, this week, obviously, the Mark Gay deal has been played out the Mark Gay deal has been played out in public. Does that disappoint you or frustrate you at all?
No, not at all. I think I can only control myself and what I say. And I try to do that as well as I can. But you're not in control of every aspect of the deal in other clubs and sometimes even your own club. And that's fine, because there's loads of different ways to work. I don't comment on transfer speculation, more out of respect for the other club and for the other players involved, because if you comment on one, then you have to comment on everybody. So I don't want to go down that road. I try to be very respectful, knowing that that's how I would want to be treated the other way when our players are getting linked with other football clubs. So that's why I do what I do.
I think it was in total you mentioned that you hope to get at least one player over the line before the transfer window closes. Is that still the case?
Hopeful, yeah. We're working hard. There's sort of no lack of effort from our side. But as I said earlier, there's nothing close.
Thanks, Jordan. We'll go Dominic and then Chris.
Hi, Eddie. You spoke about managing squad numbers, and incoming's obviously really important to that, but obviously outgoing's just as pressing in the final 2 weeks of the window.
I wouldn't say it's pressing. I think as I said earlier, we've got a tight squad, so we don't have excess players. I'm naming a squad tomorrow, and that's probably every player that's fit would be in it. I don't think we're going to have anyone spare. So that's how tight we are at the moment in terms of that. Of course, we've got a few injuries as well that are still in the mix, as I spoke about earlier. So I'm certainly not pushing to lose anybody. And
you touch on Sandro Tonali's return. It's now potentially less than 2 weeks away. Given how long he's been out, will he be in a position to start games, or will you have to ease him in almost?
I think he'll be in a position to start games. It's whether physically he's very fit. He's in a really good place. He just hasn't had the matches and the game sharpness that you can only get from the games. Very difficult for us to stimulate him in that way. We have put games on. We have had training games, but they're not the same. They're not Premier League games. They're not in front of a crowd. They're not everything that you get, all the emotions you go through before you play. It's not the same. So I think he'll be fit. I think he'll be ready to play. Will he be in his absolute best condition? Probably not for a month or so, I'd say.
Thanks, Dominic. Chris Waff.
Morning, Eddie. At the end of last season, heading into the window, you sort of talked about hopefully evolving the squad and the team. By this stage, going into the first game of the season, did you expect to be further ahead with that? Did you expect to have further signings who would materially improve the first 11?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have evolved the squad, but it's not necessarily always in terms of personnel. Of course, yes, we've had a couple of incomings, but it's more, can we take the team on tactically? Can we take the team on with how we're playing? We're trying to do that all the time. We're trying to add layers to our game. We're trying to improve. Have we done that? I think we have during pre-season. Obviously, the proof will be in what we deliver going into the season. But I think the players that we have here and the squad we have is in a good place and ready to play.
And if you ended the window without another signing coming in, would you be content with the squad that you have, or are you determined to bring in further players?
Well, determined to try and improve the squad. But at the same time, if we can't, for whatever reason, then yeah, of course, I'd go forward with the squad with pride, backing every single player that we have internally to do the job we need.
Thanks. Scott Wilson.
Hi, Eddie. You just said there that you're not really pushing to lose anyone, but the club, there has been times in the past where we've said that player trading is very important. When you talk about the football and financial kind of balance, if anyone was to leave before the end of the window, would that now be a purely footballing decision, or is there still financial pressures to do outgoings before the end of the month?
There's not necessarily financial pressures to lose anybody before the end of this window, but player trading, as I've said, is key. We have to trade players out as well as players in, but that's not necessarily in the next 2 weeks, but certainly within the next window. That's what we'll have to do.
And the players that came back later, you said not necessarily quite at 100%, but are they ready to start? Are they, are you happy enough that they're near enough to be able to do themselves justice tomorrow?
Yeah, I'd say they're all of those players that came back later are physically fit. They are ready to play. They proved that in the pre-season games. Are they absolutely 100% at their maximum level? Probably not, but I think they're very close to it.
Thank you.
Kieran Kelly?
Morning, Eddie. Obviously, Newcastle have been very persistent in the past in the transfer window with top targets, Gordon, Livramento, Isak. Is there an element of holding your nerve, staying calm? Outside we look at it, there's only maybe 2 weeks left. Do you have to stay calm to get that right player maybe this summer?
Yeah, I think there's two ways to look at that. Yes, if you believe in the deal and you believe in the player and it's still within your financial structure, then yes, 100%. But then there are times when you have to go, no, do you know what, that's too much. And we've done that plenty of times in the last 2.5 years, and sometimes you wouldn't find out about that, where you'll have to switch targets. So I'm sort of giving you an answer of both, really, because it depends on the deal and it depends on what money you have to spend at that time.
And like the season before last, maybe there have been pundits who maybe feel Newcastle won't finish in the top 4, won't finish in the top 6. Can you relish being a dark horse? Does that give you any fuel?
I don't. Are we a dark horse? I don't know.
I suppose if you look at other teams have spent more money, that's how some people judge, if they have to preview the season right now, that maybe you go under the radar a little bit.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to be clever. I don't actually know what people are saying about us. So I don't know. I think from our perspective, I'd probably prefer to be that, and related to the answer I gave earlier, that when you look at the sums invested this summer, we're way off what some clubs have invested, but that doesn't guarantee anything, but it does maybe change the expectations at that football club. So I think, as I said, we continually get called the richest club in the world. We haven't been able to spend that money, so we are where we are. I love the squad that we have, and I probably prefer to come from that dark horse, that not fancied, written off. We'll take that if that's the narrative, and we'll try and prove people wrong. That's what we've always done here.
Thanks, Kieran. Go Louise Taylor and then Simon Bird. Louise?
Hi, Eddie.
Hi, Louise.
How are your relationships evolving with James Bunce and Paul Mitchell, and are the boundaries set to your satisfaction?
It's been good, yeah. I think James, speaking individually, has come in and done a really good job. He's very hands-on, very involved in what we're doing day to day. Been hugely impressed by his work and how he's adapted to us and how we've adapted to him. There's always that, you're trying to build a new relationship very quickly. Hugely impressed. Same with Paul. Paul's gone about his work. I don't have the day-to-day necessarily contact with Paul that I do with James. He's obviously got a big job to do. He's sometimes travelling, he's sometimes here, but we're building, I think, a really strong relationship. I've been very impressed by his work and wealth of experience. Worked at some huge clubs. He's done his CV and his track record is incredible. So, yeah, I think we're in a good place. I've been enjoying the relationships.
So your initial anxieties which were understandable, have been allayed?
I think, as you quite rightly asked, in terms of the boundaries and the relationships, yes, we're in that early stages where we're adjusting to each other and forming those relationships, and so far it's all positive.
Thank you.
Thanks, Louise. Simon?
Hi, Eddie. You've not got a marquee signing yet, and many of your rivals have spent heavily and have. But yet there's an expectation for you to deliver sort of top 4, top 6 again. Is the club still keeping you happy? In reference to your Germany comment.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the club's job to keep me happy. I don't look at it that way. It's about, I'm certainly not sat there going, I demand this and I demand that. I'm not that kind of guy. I want to push the team forward. I want us to have the best chance of being successful. I want to try and reward everybody connected with Newcastle that's given me and the club so much. So I am pushing to try and deliver that. Yeah. But I also have to understand where the club's at, and there's some things you just cannot do. Yeah. So you have to accept it. You can't react any other way than go, okay, what can we do? Not worry about what we can't do. Yeah. And that's always been very much my mindset as well. Let's deal with the facts, and let's try and push the team forward in any way that we can.
Yeah. It sounds like Crystal Palace have a big decision to make today. The reports are the club's got very close to the price for a player who we shouldn't talk about. Could you walk away from a deal if it's too much? Is that how the club's got to work? I mean, there's players you want, but if the asking price is too much, you could walk away.
Yeah, I've said. Well, I think I answered that earlier. That we have done many times in my time here, where, especially early on, where there was very much a Newcastle tax on any deal, where we would rung up, the price would double. So many times we were, no, that's not for us. We're not going to go down that road where we feel we're overpaying for players. I think that's changed slightly because people have seen the dynamic that we're not going to pay silly fees for players. So I think now it's returned more to normality.
Thanks. Martin Hardy?
Morning, Eddie. What does a successful season look like this year?
What does a successful season look like? I think it looks, when I look at the team and I'm seeing a growth in the team, from last year we had difficult spells. The attitude of the group was always very good. We came back for some really difficult moments with real strength, finished the season strongly. So I want to see the team evolve and improve. I want to see us scoring in the way that we were last year. I thought our attacking play was second to none. We really want to try and improve that in any way that we can. But certainly defensively, that's the big area for us from last year. We've got to improve. We've got to look to make big gains in that area. And I think if we can add it to our attacking play, I think that should serve us well.
And is one of the key things trying to temper expectations a little bit? Kind of you went up like a rocket in your first full season, but obviously there's financial difficulties now that you're trying to deal with. Is there a common of what can be achieved?
It's a difficult one for me to say that because I don't want to dampen people's enthusiasm or aims, dreams. I don't want to go down that road where I'm seen as a negative and I'm trying to kill things. Absolutely not. I want the Newcastle supporters to turn up on Saturday believing that we are capable of greatness and great things and long-term success. So no part of me is trying to kill that, but I think just backing the players from minute one till the end of the game, that's all I've ever asked for. Trying to create an environment that the opposing team comes and does not relish and does not want to play in. After the game, I can deal with the stuff that goes with that if we're not successful, but just back the players during the game.
And is there an importance, the likes of Kieran, Callum and Miguel Almiron who've been linked away, is there an importance that they're here and they're a really significant part of your squad?
Well, they're huge players for us and they're all really talented players. So there's been, I think I said this in a press conference a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, that near enough every player in the squad's been linked away this summer. So we have to collectively, I think, put our arms around the whole squad and show them how much we love them. Myself, the supporters, that relationship between player and supporters is so important because we have to see the best of these players in order for us to be successful. So I think it's a real coming together. I think hopefully starting on Saturday that we all show our love for each other.
Cheers. Thanks, Martin. Gary?
Morning, Eddie. You mentioned there about how important it is to start at home. There were 7 matches last year at St James's where you dropped points. How important is it to improve that, make St James's, that fortress again to help you get back?
Well, I think just in answer to that, I think if we could guarantee our home form from last year going into this will be pretty similar. I'd take that now. It's the away form that we needed to improve. I think our home form was really strong. I think there was a great feeling around the stadium. There was very few games where I'd walk away disappointed with our performance at St James's Park. So I think that doesn't mean that that's going to be the same this year, and teams will make it more difficult for us. They'll have different plans. We're certainly aware of what we need to do. So I think the away form is the big improvement area. The home form is can we improve it? Can we go better? We were free scoring at home. I think we entertained the supporters. Of course, there's areas to improve, but it's all linked to the feeling, I think, and hopefully we can set a good tone on Saturday.
And this is obviously your last chance to speak to supporters before tomorrow. What would just be your final message to them ahead of kick-off?
Yes, it's similar to what I just said, really. I think supporting the players from minute one to the end, as they always have done since I've been here. I think they've been magnificent. I look back to games last year, one of the key games was West Ham at home, 3-1 down, and the supporters were still cheering and singing for the players. The atmosphere was still very, very positive. We came back and won 4-3, and that was down to them. So it's those kind of moments where we need them more than ever, and just be very grateful if they could repeat that again for us.